Hello and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today and welcome to the Monarch Butterfly Conservation webinar series. Today's webinar topic is pollinator-friendly ground cover for solar sites. My name is Jenna Tots, Education Coordinator for the Monarch Joint Venture. We are excited to continue hosting this webinar with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services National Conservation Training Center. We are delighted to host this presentation from Rob Davis. Rob is joining us for the second time today. He did a presentation back in 2017 titled Solar with Monarch Habitat. Be sure to check it out on the MJV webinar archive page. You'll find it under Energy and Transportation. Before we get started, here are a few expectations and community guidelines for the webinar. During the webinar, please put your questions in the chat box and we'll collect those for the Q&A session at the end. And just a reminder to keep the chat friendly and professional. Thank you. If you pause or click away or refresh the page while you are viewing the webinar, you will need to click the play button again. It will start where you left off. If you want to catch back up, you will need to slide the bar at the bottom of the video window. This webinar will be recorded and posted on both the NCTC and Monarch Joint Venture websites in 2 to 3 weeks. The entire Monarch Conservation webinar archive is free and available to watch and contains about 7 years worth of Monarch Conservation webinars on both of our websites. If you're joining us today but didn't pre-register for the webinar, we would like to count you for attendance and be able to send you follow-up resources. So please email education@monarchjointventure.org with your name and email address. Thank you so much. And finally, all of our webinar speakers represent their own viewpoints, which are not necessarily those of NCTC or the Monarch Joint Venture. And now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Rob Davis is Public Affairs, Programs, and Media Relations Lead at Connexus Energy, the Midwest's largest electric cooperative, nationally and regionally recognized for its innovation, affordability, and providing reliability in the top 5% of all utilities nationwide. Davis also serves as chair of the advisory committee to the National Renewable Energy Lab's INSPIRE study into low-impact solar. And an alum of NREL's Energy Executive Training Program, Davis's work has been featured in trainings in the U.S. Department of the Interior's National Conservation Training Center, the U.S. Department of Energy, and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, in feature stories in Fast Company and Scientific American, and on TED.com. Previously, Davis helped launch technology startups and created the international crowdsourced campaign that launched the Firefox web browser. He is a graduate of Macalester College. Welcome, Rob. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and toss it over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenna. And thanks to the entire Monarch Joint Venture community and all the staff and leadership with the organization. It's really been such a pleasure to learn so much from you all, and really have appreciated the collaboration that we've had with Wendy and other folks at Monarch Joint Venture over the last many years. I'll share my screen here. I've got some great visuals and stories to share. And so thank you so much for the introduction and the very kind words. I'm with Connexus Energy, as you said. We are an electric cooperative. We're organized under a cooperative business model. And so that means we have an 8-member elected board. We're the largest co-op in the Midwest, a couple $100 million of revenue, 217 employees. And a lot of our electric service is provided from wires that are underground, as well as some overhead line. But we provide power to portions of about 8 counties across the North Metro. And of course, being a cooperative, we share knowledge and insights cooperatively. And we're always glad to do that. But first and foremost, the things that everybody takes for granted is, when you go to that on-off switch, or you plug in your phone or you plug in your car, you expect the lights to turn on. And we're delighted to be recognized nationally for our grid innovation and grid resilience. And if you come and move into Connexus service territory, you'll be glad to know that you will only very infrequently have a power outage. And so it's not easy to provide reliability in the top 5% of all utilities nationwide, but it's something we are very proud of. We are also incredibly competitive on affordability. So lots of places to move into in Connexus Energy Service Territory. So you can bring your business, bring your family, and come on and become a member of Connexus Energy. Personally, I'm not just a utility guy, as my friends poke me, but I'm also the owner of a 1976 copy of National Geographic story about the discovery of a monarch sanctuary high in the mountains and down outside of Mexico City. And also delighted to have provided this beautiful photo to Stephen Grodsky and team for his book on renewable energy and wildlife conservation. So definitely appreciate the monarch butterfly and all the value and beauty and peace that it brings to our communities. So, but I want to start really. I go to this slide because all of this started in space. And this is a very unlikely place for this all to begin. But back in the 50s and 60s, the United States was in a space race. And we needed to invent a technology that was lighter than batteries and that could allow satellites to go into orbit and stay there for years and years and years at a time. And so they came up with this unique innovation called photovoltaic or PV solar. It's solar panels. And so that's an American innovation, and it was driven by the space race. So since that time, those things have gotten cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And this curve showing a huge price declines in terms of solar panels themselves, it's even gotten a lot cheaper than that. And so now in more and more areas of the country, the cheapest way to produce electricity is actually harnessing the power of the sun and converting it directly into electricity with a PV solar panel. That said, we have a lot of people that are interested in harvesting some of the, nearly 2 million megawatts of solar energy that strikes Connexus Energy's service territory most days. So it used to be there was a few, and there was a few more, and then a few more. And now we have hundreds and hundreds of members that are excited to invest and choose to put solar panels on their rooftops. And Connexus interconnects these systems in 3 to 5 business days on average. So we're very supportive of our members' decisions to invest in harvesting some of this abundant renewable energy. And we also plug in some of the solar energy right into the grid with some grid scale projects. So Princeton, Athens, St. Francis, Ramsey headquarters, and Ramsey Solar Plus Storage. We have around 120 acres of grid scale solar projects paired with 20 megawatts of batteries. 20 megawatts of solar paired with 15 megawatts of batteries. So we're capturing a lot of this power and storing it for when it's most cost effective to use it. And we're using this strategy. We're saving our members millions of dollars. In fact, we had flat rates for 5 years in a row up until last year when we adopted a budget with the lowest budget increase for rates of all Minnesota cooperatives, of all Minnesota large utilities, actually, just 2.94%, half of the price of inflation. So affordability and reliability. And so it's really nice to be here talking about not just those two things, but also sustainability and doing it in ways that create stacked value. And so it wasn't that many years ago when solar was invented. And then the idea of doing large scale solar arrays on the ground, it was, using the best knowledge they had at the time, that it was thought that we needed to put gravel under and around the panels. We thought, oh, this is an energy generation facility. Maybe we should design it like a substation and have nothing concerning anywhere around the panels. And as a result of that mindset, these industrial land uses have caused a lot of tension. You might have seen, pictures like this one or situations like this one where people are reacting and thinking, oh, that doesn't look good to me. I don't want a giant, 10-acre plot or a 100-acre plot of gravel and solar panels in my community. And that's what policymakers thought as well here in Minnesota, where we're located. So back in 2015, there was some research done into public opinion. It was interesting, no surprise, land of 10,000 lakes, that water quality was absolutely the number one issue that Minnesota voters identified. But amazingly, after water quality and before clean air, it was pollinator health. So there's all kinds of people that think about and care about pollinator conservation and how we can save the butterflies and the bees and all of our little critters in a meaningful way. And so because of that, there's folks that in Minnesota that started doing some research and found pictures of this site in the UK, and it inspired some additional work. And in fact, at the same time, Connexus Energy built in 2014 and 15, we built the state's largest solar array for a co-op. And it was just 1.2 acres. It was large at the time, but it was the largest co-op solar array. And we were also planning to put gravel under and around the panels. And then at the very last minute, one of our members said, "Oh, hey, we're experts. We're, Princeton, Minnesota, headquartered Prairie Restorations. We provide power to them." And they said, "You don't have to choose gravel. You could establish a low-growing meadow or a prairie." And so we selected that option, and it has been a great insight, and we're thankful for that lesson that we've learned since. So Connexus very much employs and embraces this idea of using electricity that we generate here, and basically generating it here and using it here. And so we can stack all of these benefits. We're keeping the land rents in the community, and we're creating more benefits for our members. So this philosophy has resulted in, and being very early in developing a pollinator-friendly solar project, has resulted in Connexus. When you go search for, as you can see in the upper corner of this slide, when you go search for pollinator-friendly solar, you're finding pictures from Connexus's headquarters solar project. And not just one, but whether you're searching for pollinator solar or pollinator-friendly solar, you'll find all kinds of pictures of our headquarters. And that's validating. But it does make, I think, an interesting question. It prompts an interesting question, like, should every solar project look like this one with a blanket of black-eyed Susans? We all know, I mean, if we're on a conservation webinar, we know that black-eyed Susans are an early successional species, so it's not going to look like this forever. This picture was in 2015, and it won't look that way. We'll see more and more diversity, but we also know that that we can do better than bare ground or gravel. So what constitutes pollinator friendly? And it was nice that Minnesota actually asked itself that question and had the experts to be able to come in and provide some opinion. And so Marla Spivak and Karen Oberhauser, with their great expertise, were able to share some insight that was used by the Minnesota Board of Water and Soil Resources and others to establish a state law. Let's hear from them.
Hi, my name is Karen Oberhauser, and I'm a professor in the Department of Fisheries, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology at the University of Minnesota. And this is my colleague, Marla Spivak, who's a professor in the Department of Entomology. And I study butterflies, and she studies bees. If people eat fruits and vegetables, they should probably care about pollinators because they're so important to our diet. Pollinators are animals that move pollen from flower to flower. For bees, habitat is everything because it provides them with good nutrition. Monarchs need access to nectar, which comes from the same kinds of plants that bees need. And when bees and butterflies have good nutrition, that provides the substrate to help their immune systems. We know that habitat loss is the leading cause of the declines of almost every species. Put in habitat that's going to make a huge difference to biodiversity. It would be wonderful to have flowers and pollinator habitat around and under solar panels and solar arrays. And it will look better, and there's everything positive and nothing negative about it.
That's a fantastic message from Karen there, and she's absolutely right. It's exactly what we've learned is that there's been all kinds of positives by adopting pollinator-friendly solar standards, which is an incremental. It's at the intersection of something that's incremental but also meaningful. Because as a utility, we don't know what's best for pollinators. We trust the scientists to help inform our practices, and then we utilize those standards and require them because the last thing we want to do is be accused of greenwashing or faking something. And so it's great that the Minnesota policymakers like Representative Rod Hamilton and Senator Dan Sparks advocated for some policy, passed it into law that basically formally recognizes beneficial habitat. And that allows an organization like Connexus to be able to require those standards, meet those standards, and then make the claim that our solar arrays provide beneficial habitat to pollinators. So this is called a pollinator-friendly solar scorecard, and we simply require that these scorecards are used for each of our 5 ground scale solar projects. They ask a variety of different questions from percent wildflower, native species, and other things. And it's a great way to get started with implementing pollinator-friendly practices because it gives you a wide variety of flexibility, and it helps you identify some of the steps that are necessary and meaningful toward establishing a beneficial ground cover. As I mentioned, this is one of the benefits. We really risk, being accused of making false claims. And so it's really nice to be able to have a standard to fall back on to say, hey, we're meeting and exceeding these standards by a meaningful amount, and that results in a net win. But ultimately, it comes back to the science. And I want to highlight this practice or this project that I'm associated with, and is led by the National Renewable Energy Lab and Argonne National Lab. And so the INSPIRE study has been going now for several years. It's the nation's largest study of solar site and design practices that are integrated with agriculture and beneficial to ecosystems. And so what INSPIRE looks at is a variety of different designs and a variety of different locations to establish kind of some design principles and approaches in terms of actually integrating agrivoltaics or crop production or pollinator habitat or grazing into solar arrays. And that's helpful for a utility like us to have some insight into what is the best practice and what's cutting edge. What we've already seen here in Minnesota as a result of the INSPIRE study from 3 different utility scale sites is that there's a 3x increase in beneficial species over time. In other ways, in other sites, there's a 4x increase. And ultimately, the energy production can result in cooler temperature. It can be benefited because of cooler temperatures from the thicker vegetation. And the O&M costs can go down for these projects, having to mow them less and less. For example, our own headquarters solar project gets just 1 mow a year, and one of our other solar projects gets 1 mow every other year. So it can be a huge cost savings for organizations that choose to count those things and ensure that they're embracing these design standards to help them save money. This has been, written up in the press and recognized not just in the scientific literature, but also by mainstream media. Discover Magazine and Inside Climate News had a lot of good things to say. The New York Times and Science Magazine were really generous in highlighting how these practices ensure that we're creating more benefits. And by asking for this, again, as a utility, when we're issuing our RFPs, we're proactively asking for this. And so it's an easy way to do a win-win and create more benefits for our members and the local community. The journal literature further shows that that this is a great opportunity that scales, and I'd encourage all of you to investigate opportunities for additional research as it relates to pollinator-friendly solar or agrivoltaics or co-location of agriculture and solar. One of the projects is called PHASE. It's led by a team from the University of Illinois and Argonne National Lab. And they're looking at a variety of different questions for large-scale solar projects. And as you can see from the examples here, there's really fantastic transformation over time in seeing the response of the vegetation. Now, I've got a highlight reel of several projects. So this is Connexus headquarters site on the left, and on the right, it's our Ramsey Renewable Station. And then this video was from a few years ago when we had that initial burst of black-eyed Susans. This is our site again. And these in the upper right are our batteries that are capturing and storing that solar energy. And there's lots of projects like this around Minnesota. This is the 100 megawatt or roughly 900 acre Aurora solar array by Enel Green Power. This is Enel's project again. And on this project, Enel is using sheep to manage the vegetation. And so actually beginning this year, we'll be using that same approach and managing our sites with sheep. Up northern Minnesota, Minnesota Power is utilizing pollinator-friendly vegetation for a project with Camp Ripley, right adjacent to the Mississippi River. And then in other areas of the country, an organization by the name of NextAmp has utilized pollinator-friendly solar on a lot of different sites throughout the Midwest. They've hired a company called Natural Resource Services, which is the same organization that we utilize to hire our site. And the results speak for themselves. Additionally, as you can imagine, it's not just pollinators that benefit from these sites. Let's take a look at what happens with birds.
Hi, I'm Howard Vincent, President and CEO of Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever, the habitat organization. Today we're out on a solar site looking at really quality wildlife habitat. And I think one of the big questions is, what is good habitat? And what you want on that landscape is you want that variety of forbs that are blooming in the spring. You want forbs blooming in the summer and the fall. You want it to be a resource for both pollinators and monarchs and all wildlife. And if the system's right, you're also going to be sequestering an incredible amount of carbon. You're going to be holding water and you're going to be protecting soil while generating energy. And this is really an exceptional site. That's what you're looking for on that landscape.
Howard's retired now, but he was a great leader for Pheasants Forever, and they've been a very good partner on this subject. And this is another neat thing. We partnered with Argonne National Lab, who set up some acoustic monitors on our site. And so what this project does is it looks at a full year's worth of bird songs. It records all the songs, and then they go back and they analyze all of the recordings. And this acoustic monitor from Wildlife Acoustics is just sitting in the field adjacent to our solar array. That's Lee Walston from Argonne National Lab, who has installed the system. And now today, actually on our website, and I think in the chat here shortly, there'll be a link to Connexus Energy's website, connexusenergy.com/birds, where you'll actually be able to hear some of the birds that were recorded from our solar array. And the text here on this site, it mentions specifically that we detected more than 47,000 different instances of bird calls over the last year from 23 different species. So it's really exciting to see that, you know, when we're investing in the landscape like this, that it's not just creating the clean energy benefit and the economic development benefit. We're actually creating habitat that is being utilized by these birds. Now, obviously, there's all kinds of additional research that's necessary. Argon and team have control sites, and they'll be publishing on this in the coming months and years. So as a utility, we can ask for a variety of different projects. We can ask for projects that use gravel. We could ask for projects that use turf grass. But we know that looking ahead, we're going to need a whole lot more electric generation. Particularly with the heat wave that we're experiencing this summer, we know that people go and crank on those ACs, and we know that people use other technology more and more, whether it's electric vehicles or other things. So because we are so committed to ensuring reliability on the grid, we want to ensure that these projects can be built in ways that the public support and public welcome when there's one proposed for their community. And so for Connexus, this makes a world of difference. We're specifically asking for pollinator-friendly solar. And actually, we have some remarks from our CEO as to why we're doing that.
We're all trying to figure out how to green the grid, and there's a lot of different solutions. And today we're standing at one, and that is solar energy installed near consumers. But the special thing about this particular field is it incorporates prairie plantings, which gets twice the value from the land. We get the solar energy over the long term, and then the prairie plantings have a variety of other benefits.
So you can see that site is that's a beautiful site. It's just about a quarter mile away from the Mississippi River, and it has changed in beneficial ways over time. Also out in California, the community choice aggregator called MCE Clean Energy is also asking for pollinator-friendly solar.
MCE launched electricity service in 2010 as California's first community choice program. Since then, we've grown from 8,000 customers in one county to serving over 480,000 customers across 4 Bay Area counties. As a not-for-profit public agency, we're focused on serving our communities with clean energy and programs that reduce greenhouse gas emissions while providing local benefits. One of the ways we do this is by providing clean energy to our customers through large and small-scale renewable energy projects. In 2020, MCE's publicly elected board decided to deepen our community impact by requiring pollinator-friendly ground cover for all of the solar energy projects being built for MCE customers. This means that the ground underneath or between rows of solar panels is simply planted with vegetation that attracts and provides habitat for pollinator species like bees, monarchs, butterflies, and birds. Every 3 years, these projects are checked to make sure they're still providing benefits on a pollinator scorecard. Policies like this are easy to implement, and they have a big impact on the ecosystems around us. The future is ours to protect, and MCE is grateful to be doing our part.
It's great to be joined by other entities that are asking for this stuff. When we all ask for something better, the beautiful thing is the price goes down for all of us. So colleges and universities have asked for pollinator-friendly solar for a long, long time. It's a growing list of universities that are specifically putting in their RFPs that we want the ground cover to provide meaningful benefits to pollinators and to wildlife. Also, corporations are asking more and more for pollinator-friendly solar. Big recognition for Cliff Bar that built a pollinator-friendly solar array at its newest bakery up in Idaho. And they, along with others like Giant Company, Bank of America, Organic Valley, Aveda, are specifically proactively asking for pollinator-friendly solar. Also, I need to take a moment to recognize the great work of the Nature Conservancy in a project called More Than a Megawatt. Partnering with Salesforce, they started this work to ask more and more questions about how to combine clean energy procurement with additional local benefits. And today they had an event with Rivian to announce this new white paper that's available and a set of reports. And so they broke ground on a new solar array in Kentucky in partnership with Rivian, and published this white paper about the purpose-driven toolkit to ask for local solar paired with more and more benefits. And as part of that, they very generously included a photo of Connexus Energy's headquarters solar project as an example of what's possible when you ask for local benefits paired with energy development. Cost-wise, lots of people in the industry have shared with me and others that it is completely cost neutral in terms of being an approach. From Connexus' standpoint, it's not a concern whatsoever. We really believe in unleashing the power of the competitive marketplace, because as a few solar developers have shared with me, they are not going to lose a bid based on including one seed mix versus another, because ultimately the seed mix is significantly less than 1% of the total project budget. And so here, going back several years, it used to be that there was a solar investment tax credit, and now we have the Inflation Reduction Act. And so that's the percent of public investment in all of these local solar projects. And so today that public investment stands at about 30%, and that those will go through 2030. It's a great opportunity for landowners and farmers that are looking to lease some of their land for solar development. And it's a great opportunity for energy buyers like Connexus, who see no increased cost as a result of specifically asking for better ground cover. And importantly, there's already some preliminary research showing that the practice of integrating agriculture into the design of solar arrays results in increased public support. This is very important to us as a utility, because we build trust with our members and we reflect their values. And so we want to ensure that they trust us to keep the lights on. And so by proactively asking for ground cover that looks like this, we have a partnership with our communities and ensure that projects are built in ways that reflect their values as well. Importantly, the benefits don't just stop at creating habitat for monarchs and pollinators and birds. There's also really interesting and transformative benefits that happen for groundwater. And so you can see here in this graphic that was produced by the Great Plains Institute for the U.S. Department of Energy's PV Smart study, that when solar panels, when the lower edge is at 36 inches, you're actually creating more options for the developer and the site owner. You're creating more options in terms of what seed mix can be utilized, and enabling the site to maybe only need one mow every other year, or maybe one graze from a sheep every other year. As panels get lower and lower, your options go down and down and down. And so you have fewer options and more requirements to have to keep the panels from being shaded by the vegetation. And unfortunately, some of the lower growing species like turfgrass have really shallow root systems. And so they are not very resilient in the face of drought or in the face of a deluge and a storm. And so, with a drought, turfgrass really does a terrible job at tapping down into different sources of water. Whereas the deep-rooted meadow and prairie plants, their root systems will go down, several feet. And so the best way to have a resilient, high-performance landscape is to ensure that those panels are a little bit higher. Not too high, because if they're canopy solar, or if they're above a person's height in terms of constructing it, then you're requiring ultimately the construction to be include ladders and lifts, and that really slows down development. So in order to keep that right balance, maintain a relatively low labor cost, and also ensure that the long-term site management costs are a net savings, this sweet spot of 36 inches is really core. Ultimately, I mentioned the stormwater, and I mentioned the ecosystem services, and I mentioned the birds, because the idea of researching these co-benefits is exciting. And for folks here, you might be of a scientific bent. There might be someone in your network or your community that's interested in the science. And so I'd encourage you to be curious and look for more and more co-benefits. And so we know that that there's already going to be a lot of deep-rooted plants going into these projects. Maybe solar can increase soil organic matter. Maybe solar development, because it locks up land for 20 to 30 years, maybe that can influence sprawl from an urban planning perspective. Maybe some of the water can be, the evaporated water can be reduced by putting PV solar over reservoirs or canals. There's just more and more areas of inquiry. And so for you all, I'd encourage you all to just be curious and ask more questions, and go out and find out, projects where you can study and begin publishing the results, because we would love to read them and then benefit from them. We're also really grateful to Monarch Joint Venture for partnering with us several years ago. Maybe it was 2 years ago, I guess. No, last summer. And looking at solar sites that are in and around our service territory. One of them was ours, pictured here. And interestingly, the finding, and I encourage you all to go read it on the Monarch Joint Venture website. And now sample size is 3, so big asterisk, more study is required. But there was an interesting study that found that monarchs seemed to be laying more eggs in the shade of solar panels, on milkweed in the shade of solar panels, as opposed to in the full sun. And that's an interesting discovery, and could lead to a variety of different site management practices or design practices. But it could be that solar sites are a perfect or idyllic way station for traveling monarchs. Speaking of traveling, we were thrilled to be able to work with Wildlife Imaging Systems 2 years ago and install some of their camera equipment. This is a composite image like this one, showing a single monarch butterfly as it enters the site, flies around a little bit, and then lands on, I believe, a blazing star here. You can tell this is fairly late in the season. There's not a huge diversity of flowers around, but it's still rewarding to see these monarchs when, they dance and quarrel and dance around one another as you're walking around the calm meadow of a solar project. And I'm really grateful for your time and look forward to the questions. So thank you, Monarch Joint Venture, for hosting me for this presentation. And thanks for everyone's support of their co-op. I'd absolutely encourage you all to go work for a co-op if you get a chance. And a huge percentage of America is served by rural electric cooperatives, and now is a great time to go work for one.
Thank you so much, Rob, for sharing your knowledge with us today. We're going to take a few minutes now to do some Q&A. If we don't have time to answer all of the questions, I will send the remaining ones over to Rob after the webinar, and we'll be able to include the answers in the follow-up email that will go out to everyone that was registered. So I'm going to hop over to our questions here, and let's see what we've got. We'll start here. Are you seeding, or is Connexus in these projects seeding specific plants, or just letting the natives return and managing any invasives?
Yeah, we are thrilled to be able to work with development partners. And so our partners that we have with our solar arrays, they hire contractors. So they hire contractors like Natural Resource Services, or Monarch Vegetation Services, or other experienced contractors that design custom seed mixes per site. So every site is a little bit different. It happens that our service territory is in what's called the Anoka sand plain. So we have incredibly sandy soil. And it's not like that in Georgia. It's not like that in the Northwest. It's not like that in Maine, right? So obviously, this is a strategy or a practice that only works where you have plants that can grow. That said, we absolutely design a specific seed mix to perform well and perform the functions of stormwater management, first off, low maintenance, second off, and then incremental pollinator value as a third benefit.
Thank you. What does Connexus have planned for long-term management as grasses start to crowd out forbs? And then is prescribed fire possible?
Yeah, no fire and no goats. So sheep can be great. Our headquarters project is coming up on 9 years old. And so we definitely see, the encroachment of grasses, moving in, taking up more space compared to the first few years. So we've been intentional about ensuring that there's places where we're really whacking back on the grasses to make more space for healthy stands of wild bergamot or horsetail or asters and a variety of other things. But it is an actively managed landscape, and we can all do things and practices that ensure that the pollinator qualities continue into the future. As an example, one of the standard management practices and most common is removing weed trees. And so, birds are flying around, they're dropping, their droppings are spreading seeds. So there continues to have to be some either mechanical or chemical application to take care of and manage those spots. And similarly, that intentional stewardship can ensure that we're getting the right diversity and mix of flowering species to grasses.
Great. I'm going to skip down here a little bit because you were talking about the sheep a little bit. So question is using sheep as opposed to other herbivores the best choice? Are you planning to rotate them in and out? And this person was just saying, I've seen sheep and goats turn lush land barren, leaving just woody shrubs.
Yeah, and that I would say that's that solar is a different kind of a landscape than what most folks might be used to, because there is actually budget to manage the landscape and manage it in a way where it's intentional and management with an eye to the long term. So amp grazing or concentrated grazing is a standard and common practice for grazing sheep. And so the sheep might come in and be put in a fairly smallish flexible fence of an acre or two, and then moved around a project so that they're not decimating things back to where it can't, really recover. One of the benefits of sheep is that they're actually taking that vegetative material and taking it off site. And that's really keeping the amount of vegetative material off the site ahead of what could be a fire season or create a risk for fire. But yeah, sheep are great. I've seen goats. It's not goats. I've seen somebody in New York using pigs, and that's interesting. Any animal that I think is short enough in stature to get under the 36 inches of the panel, and not heavy enough to want to rub up against the panel and bend or damage the equipment is really something that you're really looking for.
Does that play into the piece of why goats are not used?
Goats, yeah. If you search online for goats in solar, you'll find some very adorable goats dancing all over the solar panels. And they're cute. And no, we don't. We don't want the goats up on the panels. And two, we know that goats are going to just chew the wires, and that's not going to result in a good outcome.
Good to know. Thank you. Specific question here, looking at, are you working with Flint Hills Resources, Pine Bend Refinery in Rosemount, Minnesota, with what is believed to be the largest solar installation in the country with pollinator-friendly solar?
So they are, great neighbors, and it's exciting. That's an example of how an energy buyer can specifically ask for pollinator-friendly solar. With regards to the largest pollinator-friendly solar project in Minnesota would be the Aurora Solar Project. It's 907 acres of beautiful pollinator-friendly meadows. And Flint Hills won't be that large. Although I think the Flint Hills project in itself, in one site, might be large. The Aurora project is spread out over lots of different specific pieces. But we can do large scale meadows, right? So between NRCS and Pheasants Forever and the great Monarch joint venture, we know how to do a low growing flowering meadow of any size and scale, whether it's 3 acres or 3,000 acres.
That's incredible. Do you have any issues sourcing plant material or seeds for your projects? In other parts of the country, this is a limiting factor with installing pollinator habitat on solar sites.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would encourage, folks that are curious about this to ensure that, they might be working with vegetation contractors that are trying to sell something they don't necessarily need, and create the idea of scarcity. So, every year there's like several million acres in conservation land that gets seeded. And by 2030 or 2040, there will only be, 3 or 4 million acres of solar panels, solar arrays total. So, we're not building solar at such a clip that we're running out of seed. We might have to use different seeds. And that for some, seed companies or some ecological consultants, might constrain their supply. Maybe they don't want to buy from their competitors. And, for energy buyers, it doesn't make a difference to us. It'd be great if stuff is local, but ultimately we know that, we want a landscape that is going to use the right mix at the right price for any given project. And if one of our contractors has to buy from, one of their competitors, that's okay.
Let's see. Do you have any advice for working with other solar providers to encourage them to adopt pollinator-friendly practices?
We're not a solar developer. Connexus is not. We're really a rural electric cooperative. And so we're a utility. And so we ask for pollinator-friendly ground cover up front. And when energy buyers ask for pollinator-friendly solar, there are an abundant number of solar developers that are ready to go and build projects that meet those standards. So my gut is that the best way to get better outcomes in terms of site design is to encourage the companies whose products you buy, encourage the cities and towns where you live, encourage them to ask for pollinator-friendly solar in their own procurement, rather than figuring out ways to require it by law. That just gets into legal wranglings. Just ensure that people are asking for it proactively, and then that's what'll get built.
Great, good advice. A topic of concern lately, wildfires. Is there a wildfire risk during the winter and early spring, considering the highly flammable dead plant canopy? And is the area mowed after the frost?
Yeah, it definitely can be. I mean, it's always, there's a saying in co-op country, if you will, that if you know one co-op, you know one co-op. And the same is true for just about every solar project. So that's a highly specific situation. where a company and a site owner would want to judge for themselves, what is the material risk of that happening? And then if need be, then they could bring in some sheep. It's a great way to, provide more benefits back to the agricultural community, to hire a local farmer or a farmer from a nearby county to bring in some sheep, graze that, material down, or bring in a farmer to bale the material if there's really that much. But, I often find that when sites get overgrown or get overgrown with Canadian thistle, it's because they were heavily compacted during construction, and then they weren't properly seeded, and the site prep was really lacking. So the early decisions that are made with regards to that lower edge of the panels, with regards to the soil compaction, with regards to seed mix, do have a consequence for the life of the project.
Here's a question from someone from Washington State. Obviously, they have lots of rain there. Is this a possibility with lower sun, with less sun? And also, do you use the rain garden concept to use rainwater?
Yeah, that's a great question. And shout out to Washington State. You guys have so many delicious things and grow so many the cherries. I don't know about the apples. I'm favorable to Honeycrisp, but you do need the pollinators. So a great place to have a pollinator-friendly solar array is near pollinator-dependent crops. That said, Minnesota is certainly plenty north, and we are we certainly get a fair amount of rain here. I think more than 40 inches on average per year. You could put some kind of additional catchment system to capture some of the stormwater and put it into an irrigation system of some kind. But today we don't see that happening. Connexus isn't doing that. There are more and more places, particularly states and places that grow a lot of specialty crops, that are doing a practice where they're actually growing vegetables, growing produce, either under the panels or in the rows of the panels. And, again, for states that have a high concentration of specialty crops and the people with specialty crop expertise, that could be an exciting opportunity. I also know in France, they're growing wine grapes in the shade of solar panels. And particularly as the sun is getting more intense, as climate is becoming a little bit more variable, particularly with regards to heat, that the shade of solar panels can be leveraged in ways that are really exciting and really helpful for agriculture.
Yeah, that's excellent. I just saw that Spanish grape farmers are having to pick at night as of late because of the temperatures. So more solar panels amongst the grapes, please. Let's see. Here's a good one. How long does it take to establish the habitats? And do you have to seed grasses before the flowers can develop?
Yeah, great question. Typically the vegetation contractors will say that it takes about 3 years. So you're first establishing, when you're completing the project, you're getting a cover crop in there just to stabilize the soil and ensure that there's not a terrible runoff situation. Then, over time, the pollinator plants will start to establish. Their first year or two, they're really growing down. And then the third year or so is when they're like bursting to life. What we tend to see is that, for pictures like this, you're going to see a big flash of black-eyed Susans, at least in Minnesota, in the third year, give or take. So years 2 to 4 are really key years for successful establishment and getting that pop that is so rewarding.
Great. In terms of periodic mowing, has or will there be consideration to overwintering larvae, pupae, or eggs, specifically, monarch butterflies and other insects and such? Will all of them be mowed at once or rotational? So that's, not everything is mowed down at the same time.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very site specific as well. It's beneficial that that some of our sites are only needing, a mow every other year. Um, and that's helpful. And then also with kind of rotational grazing, you see that opportunity for the grazing to start in one area of the site and then move over the period of a couple of weeks. But first and foremost, these ultimately are not a classic prairie restoration. What we're really focused on is providing a benefit that is meaningful, but ultimately is in the context of a managed landscape for a utility solar project. And so energy generation has to take, first priority. And that applies as well when the site is managed. There's sometimes there's vehicles driving around, and that happens. What we hope is that the good significantly outweighs the minimal and localized trade-offs that can happen. But ultimately, we know that like by turning a corn field or a soybean field into a flowering meadow that happens to be shaded by some solar panels, there's a really significant benefit in that change.
Yeah, absolutely. Good things to remember, though, first and foremost.
Yep.
Solar panels. I know we kind of touched on this, and you had a great graphic that I think was put up after these questions were asked, but what is the maximum height plants can reach before they start blocking those panels?
Yeah. Could I share that graphic again? Is that
Yeah,
right?
please.
Yeah. I'll find it. Yeah. Yeah. So here's that graphic. And in general, what you're really looking for with a solar development is that you want it to be not so high that a construction worker has to be on a ladder or a lift to construct the project. And so as long as a construction worker can pick up a solar panel off of a pallet, put it up on the rack and screw it in, that's a way to do really cost competitive solar. And so above a person height, then you're getting into solar canopy. And that's when the cost of labor really shoots up, 25, 30, 40%. So yes, for this project with the 36-inch lower lip, yes, there is, additional steel, but that's not the significant factor. The significant factor is the labor. So if this was 42 inches or 60 inches, that project would have significantly higher labor cost because of the additional time and additional staff it would take to build it. But ultimately, this area right in the middle, where the solar panels connect to the vertical tube, that's called the torque tube, and it's where a PV tracking system is either tracking to the east to catch the sun and then to the west. So if you have your torque tube at 6 feet, then ultimately you'll end up with something around 36 inches for the lower edge as the panel follows the sun.
Is that usually the most common size, that 36-inch height off the ground, or does it really vary between sites?
It really varies between sites. Yeah, when we started, here in the United States, the initial thought was only for snow. And so some states in more the northern latitudes and states that get more snow, it was a pretty standard to get the panels at 26 to 36 inches. And then as we've put more of this stuff on the landscape, the cost implications of the ground cover have become more central. And companies have begun to understand how costly it is to maintain these projects if they have to mow them several times per year because the panels are so close to the ground. So when the panels are down at 12 inches, you're having to mow that site, several times a year. And that's really expensive for, multiply that by 20 years.
Right. Great. Well, unfortunately, it's all the time we have for Q&A. There were a few questions that we didn't get to, so I will make sure that I will send those over to Rob and he can answer those, and we will include those in the final email. Thank you so much, Rob, for presenting today, for answering your questions. Thank you to NCTC for hosting the webinar, and to all of you for participating. We hope to see you at our next webinar, where we will be joined by Adriana Valera, who will present on a monarch sanctuary in Mexico, and that will be on August 22nd. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.